Yo, what up? It's your boy Tim, aka T.O. Speaks.
And it's your girl Yami, aka Yams Be Saying, and you are now tuned into
Love and Theology.
I know I've questioned many things in this world, but I never had to question your love. So I know one thing's for sure. I can put trust in a real love, your love.
For every mom who ever missed a meal so they would have enough to let their babies eat.
Yo, this week episode that we have is, it's exciting, unexpected, because I thought it would never happen. And I'm just I don't even know what to say.
Listen, if you've been watching, following, listening to the Love and Theology podcast, you know that in essence, it probably should be renamed the Love, Theology, and the quotes from this specific individual. But we were not only, as we're still kind of finding where we're developing as a podcast, right. It's more, I think it's safe to say that we will also be dealing with marriage, a relationship, in the framework of life and theology and whatever that we're going to be doing.
And I also say, with everything we've been dealing with, sometimes life comes full circle, man.
Yeah,
it does, man. Sometimes you don't understand where God's taking you, and He begin to reveal Himself in little subtle ways. You know what I mean? Subtle ways, right? To show you that you may be on the right path. Right?
You may be on the right path, and I think in hearing these two people's, I don't even know if that sentence is right. I'm smart, I promise, but their stories, and their stories in connection to each other, I think. Honestly, it took me a while. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll notice that aesthetically we're different from when we actually shot this, only because it took us a while to even process, what we were kind of ingesting, if you will. So go ahead and run your part of the introduction, if you will.
So this guy, this homiletical genius, hermeneutic brilliance, is probably one of, I want to say, of the 21st century, right? We're still in the 21st century.
Yeah,
but anyway, he's a genius.
Yeah,
a genius. He's when he preaches, he allows you to see the Bible in a whole different way. Not because, what's more important, not because he changed the Bible, but he allows the Bible to preach what it really means, man. He allows the words to preach itself. I always notice when I watch, he always say a prayer, he say, God, hide me behind the cross. And we always say that, but I really see that when he preaches. You know what I mean? He let God be God. That's dope. Let God use him. You know what I mean? So
equal to that is his counterpart, his partner in crime, if you will.
Right.
A community of faith engagement strategist, also a food justice advocate. She is a member of the chair of the board of directors, the membership chair for the First Lady's Health Initiative, and beyond just kind of like her practical, things that I thought were dope about learning about her from the background. She is incredibly brilliant.
Oh, she is.
She is so funny. I'm thinking about their interaction with each other, and I was just kind of like, bro, they were finishing each other's sentences, and
they so in sync.
Yeah, like in tune with each other, and just kind of like it was just really beautiful to watch.
Yeah. It's a saying that say, behind every strong man is a strong woman, right? But honestly, what I'm starting to see just throughout life, actually, when you really see the brilliance in women, actually in front of every brilliant man is a strong woman, man, leading the way. This is Moss. Yeah. She's the only one that's actually praying for him and helping him when things get tough. She's in front of him.
I was telling him that he needed to give like a subtle introduction, and then we'll be like, and who we have is blah blah blah, but he didn't reveal it to you. So tell him who we got.
Dr. Otis Moss III
and Mrs. Monica. I'm gonna say Monica Brown Moss, but Monica Moss. Man. She is the First Lady of Trinity United
Church of Christ.
Church of Christ. He is the pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ. And they humbly, because, when you deal with church people, you got to take the H out. Humbly accepted our request to be on our podcast.
And you know what's so crazy is we went well over time.
I know.
Because it was so good. We were so sorry.
Listen, we were so caught up. Here's the thing, and this is, listen.
I couldn't even enjoy what I did because I was like, man, we messed up.
I know. But I was thinking about this. We need to produce it because they were so engaging that, like, I wasn't even paying. I would have moments where I was like, oh, we probably need to move on, or we're never gonna like, get past this moment, kind of thing.
I think an hour felt like 30 minutes.
It really did. In essence, it was supposed to be a 30-minute interview.
An hour felt like.
But they were so kind to us. Thank you so much. So, without further ado, we present to you a conversation with the Mosses.
With the Mosses.
If manifestation, I thought to myself the other day, it's crazy.
Right.
Because a lot leading up to this moment, a lot of the episodes were like, oh, Dr. Moss is never going to hear about this. So let's just talk freely, you know? And for us to get to this point where...
I remember saying, like, man, I didn't use some of Dr. Moss quotes, and now I never thought he would see it, but now he's seeing me bite his style.
Pretty embarrassing. Oh, one more question. Very important to me. Mrs. Moss, how do you like to be addressed?
So, you know, that's always a funny question for pastors' wives and first ladies of churches. I'm very comfortable with being Monica Moss. Now, I see you're not comfortable with that. So, you know, for the flavor of your show, don't call me First Lady, though. I don't want to be First Lady. You could say she is the First Lady of Trinity United Church of Christ, but how about you can just call me Mrs. Moss, if that makes you feel.
No, yeah, I can't. I gotta give you a title. I can't call
she
you. She
can't stand First Lady for some reason.
No, listen. There's not that I can't stand First Lady, right? Like my mom.
She always be like, it's more to First Lady than just First Lady.
Absolutely, it better be the only lady, right?
So that part, right? And like you have somebody like my mom. My mom would tell you, I knew from the jump I was gonna be somebody First Lady. She's a pastor's daughter. She's a pastor's wife, and she is fully. So she embraces it. She whatever. That's cool for her. My problem usually comes when we get into the pastors, like co-pastor situation, and you calling him pastor and you calling her First Lady. That's gonna be that's the thing.
Oh yeah. I'm not a co-pastor. You know, I'm a community servant, and I grew up in the Episcopal Church. So when I married this Baptist preacher who turned UTC,
that's just funny. It's
general. That was a very different experience for me, and my model for being a first lady, I have two of them.
Yes.
The woman that I grew up with in my Episcopal church, Mrs. Marion Pender, was just the sweetest lady who just was. She didn't need a title. I never even had heard the term first lady until I became a part of this Baptist experience. And so then with my husband and meeting his mother, who was definitely a first lady, definitely a first lady. So I'm somewhere in the middle. Like
Mom does not like that term, though.
Mom doesn't like that term either.
She does not like that term.
But I'm very comfortable with, I don't want the kids calling me Monica at church, but you know, people call me Lady Monica, Miss Monica, First Lady Monica, Mrs. Moss, you know, whatever makes them comfortable. But I'm good. You know, that doesn't define the work that I do at church. And so, you know, I'm Otis Boo. That's what I am.
There you go.
Let's do a Genesis then.
Okay.
If you could, each individual, let's talk about kind of your essence. Because one of the things that we really like, I think Tim is probably going to be more like practical as far as like, you know, who you guys are, digging deep and stuff like that. I'm really interested in learning how you guys make this thing work.
Yeah, we want to know how y'all navigate marriage in your calling, things of that nature.
I'm talking about like, even for, as I'm working on my doctoral thesis, a lot of the kind of the things that I realize that I'm really passionate about, I didn't think it was going to be marriage because I didn't want to be like one of those. I just didn't want to like do anything about it. But we are the pastors of the marriage ministry at our church. So in essence, I have to build my project around that kind of thing. But I am interested these days with like the narratives that like are changing kind of in this culture concerning how women operate specifically in this kind of dynamic. But before we get to that, I think I would like for you guys to maybe talk about who you guys were before you guys even met each other. Like, what were your dreams? What were your visions? What did you see yourself becoming? And keep in mind that I have done my due diligence as a producer. So I have stalked you guys in various I'm looking for things that nobody else has seen or heard about who you guys thought you were going to become. And then we can get into how you guys eventually met.
Well, it's funny. We've never been asked that. We've been asked so many times, how did you meet? When did you meet? How did you come to, fall in love and all those types of things? But it's almost funny because we met when we were 18. So there wasn't a lot before we met. We did meet freshman week of freshman year. I was at Spelman and he was at Morehouse. And so we've never had to talk about what we were or who we were before.
That was high school.
Yeah, we were in high school. We were in high school in Florida. I'm from Virginia and Florida, both places. And you are from
Yeah, where? That's right. She's a Floridian.
South Florida. I'm from a place called, was born in Fort Lauderdale, but I'm from a place called Miramar.
I've heard of it. Yeah. I'm sorry, Tim.
Sorry, that's about all you probably just heard of. There's not much to know about it. But
well, my family moved, and this, I guess, would be before we met. I was born in Virginia. My family's from Virginia, and my parents were young parents, super young. I was that oops baby that showed up in college freshman year from my mama. And they made a decision to wait a little while before they got married, which was actually quite bold. In 1970, my grandmother said, you don't have to get married right now because you had a baby.
Really?
And which was, a little different than.
That's pretty radical.
It was very radical. Yeah. So she made a decision to wait a couple of years and then did eventually marry my father. And they moved to Orlando, Florida, because this is interesting. My grandmother told my father, if you want to marry my daughter, you need to finish your education. And she told my daughter, if you want to marry this young man, you can finish your education.
Yeah.
Take care of this baby until the two of you can stand on your own 2 feet. So my dad was a smart, kind of nerdy guy who was really gifted in science and math. And he became an electrical engineer, and was recruited to move down to Florida to work at NASA. So the backdrop of my childhood before we met was this space industry. We spent a lot of time at watching shuttle launches, and I remember the day that the Challenger blew. My dad was working that launch, and my mother was an educator, and so I had this. It was an exciting childhood growing up in Central Florida, but my heart was always with Grandma and Grandpa, and so Virginia was where I was. Any chance I had, I was back in Virginia. So summers were spent in Virginia. So that's an interesting question, because I never really have thought about it in the context of our marriage, like who I was before, because I was just a kid.
Did your dad film the Challenger? He
did. He worked in the video systems for the launches. So when HTV came out, he was on the ground floor of that's how the shuttle program helped to grow HDTV. And so they were on the front line of implementing HD cameras and all those types of things. It was interesting. And so I was that kid I have 2 younger brothers, but I was always that kid I love nature. I was in creeks and always finding frogs and turtles and I still like that stuff. I'm always in nature. And so I did a lot of that growing up in Florida and Virginia.
That's dope. Do you still go back and forth to I guess not Orlando too much, but Virginia? Is that what you consider home?
And that's another really good question. For the longest time, it was so funny. When we first got married, he would say, I know you love your grandma more than you love me. And I was like, yeah, I do.
It took a long time for her to love me like she loved her grandmother, boy.
have a longer history there, you know. But
It was y'all two.
it was us. She used to say, we go way back. We go way back.
And they from Southampton County.
Southampton County.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so what was your question again? You said
I asked if you feel like that's home. Yeah.
There are parts of me. I think of Virginia and Grandma and Grandpa's. They're both gone now, but you know, home was in many ways where they were, and it's very interesting because now home has become us. You know, and that was an interesting transition because for a long time, it was so much based on where we were living, and now it's just who we are, and so that has grown over the years.
Ooh, that'll preach.
And I want to just say that I'm searching for that love from my wife, so don't feel bad, Dr. Otis. You know, she.
As possible. Okay.
And I'm telling you, she loved her some Grandma Brad. I loved me some Grandma. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, Grandma Bradley was the bomb.
She was something else. She was an amazing lady. She was so kind. And she could cook, boy.
Well,
yeah. She used to make my husband butter beans. She would say, "Okay, I'm gonna have butter beans."
Bowl.
She would have butter beans.
Just a bowl of butter beans. I said, "I'm happy. Just give me the butter beans. I'm good."
Butter beans, the stove cornbread on the side with the butter.
Oh yeah, yes, most definitely, yes.
I don't know nothing about it. That's that country stuff. I am from South Florida. That is not the same.
All she like is chicken and rice.
That's pretty accurate.
Different culture. Yeah.
Pretty accurate.
So what about you, Dr. Otis Moss? Like,
are you gonna call him Dr. Otis Moss every single time?
I wouldn't reverence him any other kind of way.
My God, this is gonna be so awkward. Go ahead.
Well, the question is like, who were we before, right? So that was high school. So for me, I wanted to be a filmmaker. Really, I wanted to be a cinematographer. And I used to have my father got me a video camera when I was small, and I was running around filming everything. I have these old kung fu movies that I made with my crew. I'm like hanging out the side of a window of a car. We're doing chase scenes. I'm getting a skateboard and I'm on the camera so that I can, get this unique look and whatnot. And we're making all of these little movies and whatnot. I said, I'm gonna be a film. I'm gonna be the next Spike Lee, all of that. Or I said, I'm gonna write some movies, or this, that, and the other, something of that nature. So that's what I thought. And then I was gonna be an athlete. I said, I'll make some movies and I'll run track, play football, play hockey. I played hockey, played basketball, just whatever.
You played ice hockey.
I played ice hockey. Ice hockey.
You're from Ohio, so I guess there's
a tradition. There's a tradition in Northeast Ohio of hockey, like teen tots, just like you have Pop Warner football.
Yeah.
A huge tradition in Northeast Ohio, the western part of Pennsylvania. No, I was one of the only, and I was the tallest one out there. And there were like three of us that played hockey together, and we traveled all around Ohio playing hockey.
Y'all would have token blacks like in Mighty Ducks.
Very much so. Very much. We got called every name you can think of in the book. Not by the folks on the ice. I'm talking about the parents.
Really? Oh, I can imagine.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was rough. It was rough. But I really believed that I was going to be be the cinematographer. That was the main thing. I wanted to shoot the film. I didn't necessarily want to star in it. I wanted to be behind the scenes doing stuff. And that's what, when I went to Morehouse, I was like, it'll either be that or maybe political science, and something dealing with Congress or as a representative, something. Lawyer. Yeah, lawyer, something along those lines. Ministry, no, I didn't think so.
So we're being transparent on this, right? We're being...
Give me the tea.
That's the only way.
Let me tell you this, and this I think will inform the conversation. Since you're talking, this podcast is for married couples, right?
In theory. I mean, yeah. Yeah, it is becoming that. I didn't want it to, but it is.
All right. So let me tell you this, and I hope you don't mind that I'm going to
Mhm.
say what I'm going to say.
I can't say nothing. She gonna say it anyway.
Well, no, but I'm not trying to expose you, but I'm going to expose myself as well, because I think it is such a factor of why. Well, the next question we're going to answer is, how did we come together, and how have we sustained this?
Yeah.
So I'll just talk about myself. So I grew up in a tumultuous household. And it was great. I told you I had this backdrop of the space shuttle industry and blue skies and frogs, but that wasn't the only thing that was going on. It was hard in my household, and I was I had to be a very responsible, probably overly responsible young person. And so when I think about the time before we met, my only objective was to get out of the house that I was in. Wow. So I had to work my behind off. I said, I know that I have to get a scholarship to go to school. And so that was my single objective. I had some others, being a protective big sister, being a protective daughter, being a nice young lady was always my thing. Like I always was, I was the appropriate girl. I wasn't trying to like rock the boat too much, because there was too many other knocks being taken place, in my household. So it was really important for me to just get through. And I saw going to school as my way out. And so in your household, you were dealing with.
Yeah, it was my household. My parents were laid back and quiet, but there was also this turmoil going on. Because my sister was a paranoid schizophrenic. Brilliant. I mean,
beautiful, brilliant.
Model, writer, poet. I mean, she was really truly my first year. The reason I love Black literature so much, the reason I love jazz is because it was introduced to me by my sister. The room was next to mine. She's like, hey, Otis, look what I got here. I want you to listen to this. Hey, let me read this to you tonight.
Al and
I got
Nikki Giovanni and. Yeah. And see, and I feel like I grew up with them. We've been together so long.
Right. She knows all the stories. That's why I love James Baldwin. She read James Baldwin to me when I'm like 5, 6, and 7. That's why I love Zora Neale Hurston. She's reading that to me. My parents didn't know. We just roomed next to each other. She's like, I got a story for you. If you act right, I'll read you a story.
Act right.
She would play music, and it was Al Jarreau was her favorite. And the first jazz concert that I went to, she took me to see Wynton Marsalis. I went and went to a library to get an actual record. And he had this young guy named Wynton Marsalis had this record called Hot House of Flowers.
Yeah.
And Hot House of Flowers had a version of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star actually on it. I'm like, that don't sound like the way I've heard it. I mean, it sounds
different.
Yeah. And so I'm listening to it, and my sister was like, look, I'll take you if he comes to town. And that changed everything for me. I mean, she was the hero, but she was a paranoid schizophrenic. She would have these episodes, and I was the one who could calm her down.
And he was the one who realized there was something going on. Right. And so you have these two people who come together at a very early age. I mean, he couldn't even grow a mustache and a beard hardly when I met him. So, and so here we come, bringing our own
trauma.
Well, our own trauma, our own baggage, but it was young baggage.
Yeah.
So. It wasn't nuanced. We had never talked to therapists and accountability groups
whatsoever.
We just had it. And so we had we had common values, even at a very young age. But we had never really broken down what our experiences were.
That's true.
In a way that really has taken the last 28 years of marriage, but like 33 years of being together for it to unfold and for it to become something other than what it was. And so but they were both pretty heavy things for young people to be carrying. And so here we were, these 18-year-olds, and Spelman and Morehouse, and we meet, and it's instant. It really is instant. So, so you want us to tell you about when we met?
Let me. What you had?
But what I was going to ask was like, with everything y'all was going through at such a young age, right? What kind of inspirations did y'all pull on so you can keep on, thrive and keep moving forward? And the reason I asked that because, like, I remember when I first got introduced to Dr. Otis Moss, right? I remember I was looking at, I'm gonna say it, stop hating.
That's the whole name for me. I just don't understand the whole name.
Do you have a problem with it, Dr. Moss?
I'm cool with it, man. I'm cool with it.
I was like, he's gonna say no because he's humble. So like that's but he's probably like he could have talked to Mrs. Moss later and like that wasn't weird to you.
You a hater, man.
You remember that one time that I met that one person and you were like, oh, look at you getting excited. This is your moment.
But see, you understand, and I'm gonna go into it. Like I remember when
Go ahead, you remember what?
I remember when I was struggling with the calling on my life, right? I remember I came across Dr. Otis Moss, right? Because I came up in a household where my father didn't graduate. I don't think he made it past the 6th grade. He was just a hard worker. I came up with 4 boys, and he provided, but nobody was really intellectual, if that makes sense. So, but I had a call on my life at a young age, and I kind of walked away from it because I experienced life. But I remember when I was like, 20, 30 years old, I came across Dr. Otis Moss, and I would always listen to people like Dr. Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, right? And those people, they made me want to change the world, right? So I came across you, Dr. Otis Moss. You made me want to change my life. You know what I mean? So,
Wow.
Honestly, he did, because I was struggling with a calling, and then I was like, man, this guy's so smart. It's okay to go to school because I was taught, hey, just go to work. I know you love God, but you got to work. So I was really stuck. You know what I mean? So one day I was watching Pastor Howard John Wesley, and then somehow I watched your When the Brook Runs Dry, that sermon right there.
Yeah.
And then that spoke to me, right? And I'm like, man, I always been like somebody would speak up for equality for Black people. And, my people would call me militant. I remember my brother said, you militant. I said, I believe militant is a racist white word that they gave to Black people.
White racist word.
Yeah, that they gave to Black people so they could shut up. I never believed in it, right?
Right.
So it's so bad. You know what I mean? So, so militants, but I would always speak up. But I remember like, man, so I began to compare you to Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. I said, they made me want to change the world, but you made me want to change my life. And you're the one that caused me to actually go to school and keep walking into this calling that that God called me to. And that's why when I saw you, I remember when I met you at Mercer University, I was like, oh man, I got so much to say to you, but I didn't know what to say. You remember that?
It was awkward.
He told me he met you though.
I told
my this great brother. He was like, because he was new there too, and so
I meet Tim outside, and I mean, we had a great conversation.
The conversation that he had with you, and
even at that time, like I was going through so much. Like, I've been in law enforcement for years. I was actually made it to the pinnacle of law enforcement. I was a criminal investigator for the solicitor's office, and I spoke up. I was trying to be like Dr. Otis Moss. I spoke the truth to power, and they fired me.
So I was trying to be like Dr. Otis Moss, and because of that, they fired me.
I'm trying to stand up to the system, and I got fired. So, but anyway, it was so great because I was trying to figure out, like, man, God, what are you doing? And then I used to tell people all the time, like, Dr. Otis Moss, my mentor, he just don't know it yet. And then I walk across the parking lot, I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know what to say to this man.
No, I'm going to leave my jokes aside because this is a very volatile moment. We're gonna move on though, right? We're gonna move on because I had so many jokes. It was on the tip of my tongue. So let's talk about your meeting. You said that it was basically kind of love at first sight, I would say, right? Yes, ma'am.
Definitely something at first sight. So
I knew it was.
Yeah, it was a. I mean, I think people have, people make assumptions about you, and they kind of paint a picture of who you are, and I think in some ways we're kind of corny in a way because it's we do have kind of like this mythology we've built around this story we're about to tell you.
Yeah.
It is the truth. It's just kind of like
Not manufactured.
Yeah, but I don't know if it feels so strange because you don't really hear about this happening a lot. Maybe it does happen a lot more, but this is what happened. So Spelman and Morehouse have a part of their tradition is to have an oratorical contest at Friendship Baptist Church for the coming freshmen. My friend Crystal Garland, yay! Crystal was representing Spelman as our speaker. So all of us, are her friends. We were cheering her on. We're sitting there. We're all happy. Yeah, Crystal spoke. And then they said, next we're going to have Otis Moss, not Dr. Otis Moss, but Otis Moss.
The regular Otis Moss.
And I had been there for the summer before freshman year for the summer science program. And so I thought I had scoped out everybody who was worth scoping out. And I was like, oh, no, I thought I knew everybody who was cute and everything like that. He was walking up and I turn around and I look, I see him coming up the aisle. I see this tall, skinny, just, I thought he was cute and everything, but I was like, who is this guy? And I thought he was so cute. And then he started to speak. And I was blown away because I had never heard a young person speak like that. And see, for me, I grew up in such a white world. Everything for me going to a Black college everything was exciting to me.
It was truly a different world.
It was a different world.
It truly was.
A different world. And so it was like that was my only my parents had gone to Hampton. And so, but it was like, everything was new to me. And so when he went up there and started speaking, I had just never heard a young person elocute like that. So I was blown away. And so after, and I'm gonna let him pick up the story. So after the service was over, people were greeting and everything. And so my whole crew went up to him and we were like, hey, I'm Crystal, I'm Gia, I'm Helen, I'm Tandy. And so I said, I'm Monica Brown and I live in LLC room 215. I was being fast. See, that's what was going on.
Listen, you already knew what you wanted. So
I knew. I was being assertive. And so then he says to me,
that's the only person I remember was Monica, LLC 215. I went home and told my roommate, Ed, best friends since third grade. I said, man, I think I met the one. I think I met my wife. And
wow.
Monica. And we never saw her again.
It's August.
Yeah, until the Alphas were
chapter
of Morehouse College. They are, a few more steps toward the light. They are trying to
Jesus Christ. Here we go.
They're doing their thing. So and then
like out of a movie.
It really was.
Movie. So it was like, everybody's like, oh my gosh, the Alphas are crossing. This is like November-ish.
They're all bald headed. They got a brick in their hand. Doing all that kind of
stuff. The Alphas crossing the burning sands. And we're so excited. And there was this girl who had a crush on this guy named Otis. I didn't make the correlation that it was this Otis because I never saw him. He wasn't at basketball games. He wasn't at the parties. I was, but he wasn't. And so
I was in the back. You just didn't see me.
I didn't see you. So she's talking to this guy who I think is so cute. I didn't realize it was him.
Oh, wow.
God, who is that? She said, that's Otis. That's the guy I told you about. I said, oh, introduce me. I'm still not making a connection from the church. I don't know why. And I said, she goes, this is my friend Monica. And he looks at me and he wasn't even trying to be smooth with it. But what did you say to me?
It. I've been looking for you.
In that voice?
He said, I've been looking for you. And I'm like, what?
Jedi mind trick was that?
Jedi mind trick.
I've been looking for
that was it. That's
And so and then we made the connection. I'm like, oh, you're the guy who spoke at the church. And so we went on our first day. He took me to Popeye's fried chicken. Walked.
I had no money.
We walked.
We had a great conversation. I mean, come on now.
It was great.
People wouldn't do that today. They'd be like, Popeye, they got to, get status and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Listen,
Popeyes, and we just had.
We had, but it almost went awry because
It wasn't a Popeyes. There wasn't a Popeyes.
it was Popeyes. No.
No.
About the other thing.
No, yeah.
Okay, so this is 1988. Okay, so we're into colors. We got a lot of colors and living colors on. But we wore bright, neons and all that kind of stuff. We had our bangs teased up, all of that big hair. So I had meticulously applied about 17 layers of purple lip gloss. I was probably glowing before I got even close to him. And he goes, one of the first things he goes, wow, that's a lot of lip gloss. And I said, oh, you don't tell me if I can wear lip gloss. I didn't say all to him, but I was just laughing, thinking back on it.
I almost messed up.
It was probably a lot. It was a purple lip gloss. So it was a lot going on. It was a lot going on.
I had a lot of borrowed clothes on too.
Yeah.
They were toofy and I had this. Dad dressed me up because I didn't have no clothes.
Yeah,
I had a t-shirt and jeans.
Yeah.
That's something I thought is interesting about both of your stories is that you guys went to school for one thing and ended up doing something completely different.
Absolutely.
So can we let's kind of dig into like purpose, right? So Mrs. Moss, you were economics, this is stuff that I looked on LinkedIn because you refused to do well on Instagram for me. But I
don't even know how to do Instagram. I don't even know my login. I gotta get better with it.
Really anti,
Talk about social media. Like, oh my gosh, who am I talking to? I don't get it.
I say, have mercy. Why did she even have this page?
I know.
But you were on the economics kind of mathematics track. Dr. Moss, you were on the political science and what was the other thing? Do you remember? Film track, and you guys pivoted from that. So we know what you guys are. You guys are together. I like that. Talk about individually how you guys came to making these transitions outside of what you initially thought you were going to do.
Right.
Now, that's a good question. So I was running track. So I thought that a lot of things got interrupted for me. When it came to this, I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be in the Olympics this, such and such year. I'm gonna train, all of this good stuff. And one night as I was running, it was dark outside. It was kind of winter time in Atlanta. So I go over to Monica and I'm saying, I want to take you over to the track.
He called me on the telephone. He didn't text me.
Yeah, an actual phone.
On an actual phone. And he said, I need you to come meet me right now. And I said, okay, I'll do that. He goes, I've talked to you about something serious. And my roommate started freaking out because she was like, oh my gosh, he's going to ask you to marry him. He's going to ask you to marry him. And you're too young. You can't do this yet. So I was very nervous. I had no clue what he was going to say.
So when we shimmy under the gate,
the track,
the track was closed. We shimmy up the gate. We were over there in the stands. I was like, Monica, I want to tell you, I think I'm being called into ministry, but I don't want to. And she's like,
I said, no, duh. I'm like, what everybody knows you're going into ministry, right? It was like a no-brainer. And this is what's interesting. Like your mom said she always knew she was going to be a preacher's wife.
Yeah.
I think I always knew I was going to be because every boy who liked me either wanted to be a preacher or their daddy was a preacher. It was weird. It was kind of weird. Because I told you I grew up as an Episcopalian, so I wasn't even like the churchy church girl.
The Baptists liked Monica.
But he says, I think I'm being called. And it was like, of course you're being called. Of course you're being called. I thought it was clear. I didn't understand the implications of that. I did not understand what all that meant. But it was clear that God had a calling on him.
I think it's so funny that you said that because I think when we met, I was at Mercer getting my master's, and I even with that I was just kind of like, Lord, I'm here. I did what you asked me to do. I'm not going any further with this kind of thing. But what I was very adamant about was that I am not going to be with no preacher.
So I remember, I remember when I told her, I said, I think I'm called to the ministry. She said, well, we're not going to be together.
I was like, oh, well, you made it easy for me. So it's kind of like.
I didn't even know your story. I didn't know you was a PK and none of that.
You grow up in this kind of culture, like I knew that I knew for a fact I didn't want to be with no pastor's kid. I was like, we got too much trauma.
Right. It's a lot.
Good. And I was like, and that's the most certain, because the running joke when I was at Florida, I graduated. I went to and graduated to the University of Florida, and the number one school, or top 5 in the United States, the only school to win the national championship in football and basketball in the same year. But okay,
we don't do PWIs on this podcast.
Oh man, but let me say, he will shade me, but he sure enough went to Oklahoma to make.
But I left and went to Miles College. So.
And now you want to go to Mercer. That is not a historically Black college. Now, what was I saying? You done messed me up.
It didn't matter.
It was important. What did I say? So I knew that when he was saying that he was interested in doing that, I was like, oh well, this is a clear indication that I'm not supposed to be with this man here. Thank you for making it clear for me, God. So it's so funny to me that that for you, you were like, yeah, of course, and then you still say, you was just kind of like, that's my man, and I'm gonna stick beside him, like. Still,
I didn't know what it meant.
She had no concept. Thankfully, she had no concept. Yeah. It was a blessing.
I didn't know. My life was my priest, Father Nelson Pender, who I grew up with, who just passed away. Oh. The best priest ever in life, and so he was a good man. He was a good man.
Really good man.
And he was such a model for my faith, and so he would answer my questions. I was a very curious kid, and he was consistent and kind and loving, and he cared about Black people and was a civil rights leader in Central Florida. And we call him our priest and our friend, our priest and friend, Father Pender. And that's exactly what he was. So, the Episcopalians don't get into all the hype, all the titles and the tables and all that kind of stuff. It's just, he was a servant.
Common prayer, and they do it every single Sunday.
Right, but it was also how they showed up. It wasn't about the pomp and circumstance of you, the first family, and all that kind of stuff. So it was. They were very meaningful to me. But so.
And then she comes in this other world. She shows up and visits Olivet Institutional Baptist Church in Cleveland, Ohio for the first time. She's like,
I'm screaming, what
is going on? What is happening?
This is different.
I got used to it.
All in response.
I said, wow. So
I do make that what's it called? What's popular in Black church, right? Is and I guess in Haitian church too, but Black church specifically is that, that talk back culture.
Right.
One of the reasons why I don't like sitting up front in your class is because I don't I learned how to do it, but I'm really kind of a silent, I talk with my body language. So my face says a lot. My, my shoulders, my body says a lot. And I be not trying to distract, people. But to your point, Haitian church, they were loud. But Black Baptist church especially is a different kind of culture.
Baptist church is fun. That's all I got to say. If you're at the right church, it can be fun to grow up. If you're in a good, Olivet was fun. The people were wonderful. It was great. And then you have the characters. There are certain people, because we were not, we were more of on the conservative side.
Really?
Working class conservative side, where there are that more Pentecostal side. That wasn't Olivet. This was Southern, we talk back, amen. And then there are 8 consistent people who are major shouters and possibly runners. Everybody else just going to talk back. Okay.
That's kind of church that Tim grew up in.
Yeah, you know what? The guy that get on the knee and did the devotion.
Oh yeah,
Oh, Lord have
he was at
mercy.
all of that too.
Yes, yeah.
Listen, the first time I see that,
Yes.
What's the name of the song? A charge, take charge.
Charge to keep my hand.
Yeah.
Come on.
the first time I saw that, I said, "Well, what's going on here? This happens every Sunday. What's going on?"
Yeah.
And they have a communion recited on the board on the wall. You know, you say the same thing every time we do communion.
Oh,
You
yeah,
know?
we had a version of it, but it was. My dad says oftentimes he went to seminary in Philadelphia, and he says he was like, I credit the Black church for helping me learn how to preach effectively. He was like, I was preaching, and I was doing okay, and then this one Black pastor, preacher came to me. He was like, "You ain't got it, son." And he showed me, how to do it. And he says that's how the Black American church, even because my dad, the church that I grew up in is fairly. They're not. What did he say? He said he himself is very reserved and very dignified in how he presents or whatever. Very articulate in how he does his thing. And
her daddy wears a tie to go to the mailbox.
That's my dad.
That's his
Oh, really?
My dad.
You've never seen my father in jeans.
Never.
And if he wore jeans, it would either be the second coming or it would be the moment that everything is about to fall apart across the land.
For him to have on jeans, there would have to be absolutely no other option for him.
Yeah.
That's her.
Absolutely not.
I think if there was no other option, he still would create these slacks.
I remember one time we had a Thanksgiving dinner. It was
That's right.
nothing but family.
It was just us.
Nothing but family. He come in with a whole 3-piece suit
I'm
on.
talking about the tie, the jacket. I said, "Daddy, like it's just us." And he was just kind of like, "But you never know when somebody gonna need you to say a word."
That's right.
Yes.
My father was in the field. He said, "I'm never going to dress like that again." He associates jeans
Dungarees.
with the field.
Don't they call them dungarees? I don't know.
Oh, and speaking of which, I was thinking about that when I saw Dr. Moss yesterday, because he had a whole time. The whole time I'm in class, I'm like, he has a tie on. Why does he have a tie on? Like, where's he going?
I was happy with myself.
I was like, where does he go? No, but okay. So, Mrs. Moss, how do you transition from, economics, mathematics to like teaching? And,
All right, so
you do the food desert.
Yeah. So here's how this went. I actually transitioned into economics because I went as a women in science and engineering scholar to college.
Mm.
That was the scholarship that got me out of the house. And so, great big blessing. And so I had no desire to go to Spelman. I was headed to Hampton University because grandma was nearby.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to go to Spelman, but I got a full scholarship through this women in science and engineering. So my father was an engineer at NASA, and he told me, "You're going to be an electrical engineer." And I was, it wasn't quite a fish out of water, but I was not. I did not want to be an engineer. I didn't want to be. I had a lot of respect for women in science and engineering, and I would have loved to have been a better student, but it was killing me. So I changed my major. And so so I transitioned there. And then when I graduated, I worked for a year, and then I went to graduate school in higher education administration because I loved college and I really wanted to return someday to be the president of Spelman College.
Wow.
Then life started to happen. And so when I became a mother, then this was a moment because I had to say, okay, I'm an educated Black woman. I'd watched my mother work all her life. My grandma, everybody was working. They worked and they raised their families. But when I became a mother, I said, I want to be a stay-at-home mom, and I want to be the primary caretaker. That was it was a really good thing. But it was a challenging thing because I struggled. I still struggle. I struggled with how work defines who you become. I couldn't say when people say, "What do you do?" I hang out with little babies and children, So I really struggled with that. I remember one time one of my dearest friends saying to me that I was wasting my potential. And I was like, oh. So I will say that when life started to continue to expand for us, it became increasingly clear that me being a stay-at-home mom was absolutely where I needed to be, because we couldn't both be as ambitious as what started to happen in my husband's life. So you see him every Tuesday in Atlanta, and he lives in Chicago. So that all the traveling started, and I mean, it wasn't even a sacrifice for me. It was the greatest joy. I was just telling my son, this is interesting. We're having this conversation. So he called me today. He calls me all the time. He's a senior at Morehouse, and he's an Alpha chapter.
Yeah, Alpha. He's so much like Monica.
But he called me today, and he said, Mom, and he said, I just want to tell you something. I said, okay, what's up? He goes, you are a good mama. And I said, what do you want? What do you want? He said, why do you think? He goes, you think I always, he goes, I'm very serious. He goes, I remember you were tired one day, but you took me and his friends, he has his crew that he rolls deep with. And he said, you got up and you took us. And I know that was a sacrifice. You've been a really good mom. And I said, do you remember me being a stay-at-home mom? You know, did that make a difference to you? He goes, yeah, I remember. He goes, I'm remembering it more now as I get older. He goes, but I liked that you would take us to school in the morning and you would be there in the afternoon. And I was like, wow, that kind of blew me away, because I didn't know that it really made a big difference to him.
Or it resonated deeply. And I can imagine, especially if you started off on some womanist stuff, not because I know you, but I feel there's an interconnectedness between that resonates with this woman power thing. Absolutely. And I'm like, oh, she's my people.
I agree. Yeah.
I am interested in your marital story. And this is the part where I go back to whatever you guys are comfortable with talking about. I'm comfortable with saying. We obviously have some insight, right, on the fact that right around the time that you guys got married, it was a very difficult moment for you guys. There was some conversation about postponing and, that kind of thing. If because we are married, right, and I do want to emphasize like how you learn to navigate very difficult and challenging situations. I would like to talk about, if at all possible, what that season of your life. What you gonna say?
No, I was gonna say like
I'm struggling with words right now.
No, I was gonna say like even with me, oftentimes people say you have to compromise in a marriage, right? So it's just this thought that I'm working through. Like I'm like, man, when somebody compromise, that means somebody loses, right? Not saying that it's right or wrong, but somebody don't get what they want, right? So I might be okay with it, but how do y'all do the compromising? Would you say compromise is a good thing, or how do y'all work through it? Because I'm trying to, like, even through my thoughts, think about this compromising thing in marriage differently. Because somebody loses, somebody just settles. You know what I mean? So is settling good, or would you look at it as somebody actually lost, or are we just working together to make things happen? Like, how would y'all say with your dynamics, with everything that y'all have going on in your life? Both of y'all are very influential. Like, how did y'all come to this agreement to marry and to keep working towards your goals?
Even amidst that's the challenge.
That's a really good question, because I would say, we had to walk and learn, because I think at one point I was thinking it's like win or lose. We were operating in a win or lose framework.
Right.
And it took time for us to realize that it was a blend compromise, but the compromise wasn't in reference to losing. The compromise was building, learning how to love someone and love yourself, and then recognize that sometimes the things that you're trying to win or you're frustrated about has nothing to do with the other person, has everything to do with you. And you sitting up there, upset, and it's really, you want to deflect. It's really you. It's really you. So for me, it took years.
It took 17 years
to recognize, all of this. One, because I had unexamined trauma that I never really knew how to examine. And I came from a, quiet, introverted family. So it, like my parents were like, oh, let's all go to therapy or anything like that, because my sister committed suicide and 4 days before we got married. And so how do you deal with that? It was like, oh no, put your head down and just keep moving. And so work and ministry became a way for me in certain ways, and I never really thought about it, distract myself to keep myself from dealing with myself.
Oh, wow, that's good.
I think that's a very accurate assessment that you, so it took 17 years for my husband to be able to say my sister committed suicide. So imagine being married for 17 years.
I couldn't say the word. I said, oh, she was terminally ill. She died.
And she passed away. My sister's deceased. But he couldn't say it to me. So he wasn't saying it to anybody if he couldn't say it to me. So we started a marriage in this place of trauma that was, the trauma was displaced by heads down. I want to be successful. That's what it boiled down to. And so, and then because he was so unwilling to deal with the truth of what had happened, and her suicide was 4 days before we got married. So of course we were saying, well, should we get married, or what? Maybe we shouldn't get married right now. We can postpone it. And it was my father and mother-in-law who said, absolutely not. You all have been planning this. Yeah. We're going to go forward with this. And they also said but it was a small time of celebration and a longer time of grief. So a lot of unmet expectations, and a lot of the things that normally happen at the beginning of a marriage were put on hold. So we didn't have a honeymoon, and we weren't carefree. My husband was mourning, and he was upset with me because I wanted to be a newlywed, and he wanted to say, no, I want my sister. We got to talk about, we have to not deal with what I'm really dealing with, which is that my sister has committed suicide and she's gone, and I'm hurt and I'm grieving. So when you talk about compromise, I don't know that, I agree. I think it's, I don't know if it's a win or lose all the time. It's sometimes you have to just hang in there long enough to see where things go. And so you can't have all things at one time. You can't have it all at one time.
Can you do me a favor and get out my business?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think about when you asked me about how do I get to food justice. Yeah. So it became something that became later. I always had an interest in making sure people had healthy food, whether it was in my house, whether it was at church, or whether, and I learned that from grandma. And so, but now I work on another level with it, trying to ensure that people who are needy have access to healthy food. But I couldn't have done that when I had a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, because my husband was heads down working through those things that, that we had to learn compromise around. We had to say, it is sacrificial. Is that a word we could use? Sacrificing, sacrificial.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an appropriate term, because in hearing that story personally, I remember thinking to myself, I was like, ain't no way, because we're only 9 years kind of into our dynamic, and we had you specifically had some kind of back-to-back, traumatic situations.
And that's one thing I had to deal with. Like, I remember one day sitting down thinking, like, man, I'm depressed. But see, I never realized because I was a functioning depressed, right? I was just, you know what I mean? So I would go to work, I would do my thing, but I would come back home and just watch TV. And I had to realize, like, this is not me. I was functioning in this society. I was existing, but I wasn't living.
Yeah.
Nobody could tell. And then she was catching the brunt of everything.
Right.
My mom passed. One day I blew up on her. And I was like, this is not good. What is wrong with me?
So I went back to this is why I didn't want to minister, because they ain't no good. I waited till that. I say, see, like you didn't trust yourself. You should have trusted yourself.
But
You know what I mean?
I would tell you, like, one thing with me, like, God always checked me before anybody else can. It's like always, my whole life, he's like, you wrong. I realized, like, man, I'm dealing with some issues.
Yeah.
You know, I saw it myself. So I can understand. I was like a functioning depressed person, and nobody could see it. And if I don't think if God would have spoke to me, I would have blew up this whole marriage. Honestly,
I'd say that it's not that no one could see it, right? Because I feel like I was saying,
I didn't want you to see it.
No, I was, but and you also don't have the language for it, right? My dad is a mental health professional. My mom is a social worker, so I do have context. I do have words that I can use, but I'm also I'm a Peter-esque person, so I always choose violence. so don't judge me. Just love me for who I am, okay?
You always choose.
Again, I'm going to go back to why I like to stay quiet in your class. I choose to stay quiet because I know that at any point, something is going to come out of my mouth and it's going to be like, okay, I'm so sorry. I know you guys don't know me, you know, that kind of thing.
I remember when the protest was going on. My mom called me up and like, where's Yami? She's not down there protesting. Because
the funny part about it is, I'll tell you this tidbit, because we both worked as investigators for different counties, right?
Oh.
Okay.
And at one point he was working in Gwinnett County, which is kind of like, as far as states are concerned, it's purple. Mm-hmm. And I was working for the county that we live in, which is Barrow County, which is absolutely red. Even in the courthouse that we worked in, my office at one time was maybe one of 5 people of color. On my floor, maybe 2 in the whole building, maybe 5, you know, that kind of thing.
If you run as a Democrat, you'll probably get last.
Oh, you're gonna lose. Absolutely. Yeah, right. So I think after Trump won, I was I was hurt.
She cried.
I was because I was angry, you know what I'm saying? So I went to work the next day, and which I thought was, this is how I knew that people were like, I had maybe given off this energy, right? Both of my parents are on the phone together, and they're calling me very early in the morning, and they're like, hey. So we know that we all had a bad night, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I know.
I just want to I want you guys to remember that, you know, if we need to bail you out, we will. But also, like it if we didn't have to. And I was dealing with a lot of microaggressions because
I remember what your silent process was like. She goes to work, she blows her hair out in this afro and wear a pig with the fist in it.
All right.
The good time. When I used to have hair, I had a big afro. And on days, especially on court days, because the justice system, not to get into a tangent, but it's so cyclical. It's kind of like you think that you're going into it so that you can help people, and then you end up going into it and you realize there's really nothing that you can do, kind of thing, or it feels that way. And I would go into these offices and I was like, I just need y'all to know that I ain't them. Like I am different. Yeah. Here's how, and you know, Black women, especially with our hairs are used to convey messages sometimes. Right? Absolutely. And I knew that when I went there that day, that everybody knew in the office, the attorneys and everybody else, like, y'all not gonna mess with me today because y'all gonna get something y'all want.
Right. Not today. Today. Yep.
We gonna like, I don't want to, I know y'all had a long day, but we do need to, I guess we do need to move on, or I'm going to be forced to keep you guys in conversation.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
What do we like? So now that we got their backstory, we got that they've gotten married. So now you guys are married, right? You guys are working. Dr. Moss, you're functioning depressed person. You know, Mrs. Moss, you're transitioning into, you know, I guess a different lifestyle. You guys are figuring out your path. In figuring out your path, I know that you guys had to do a lot of movement. I think one of the churches that you go, wasn't it your friend's church?
The one used to pastor here, Tabernacle.
Yes. Mm-hmm. That was our heart.
Yeah, that was a real blessing.
So let me tell you, so we got married. Yes. We lived in Connecticut. Mm-hmm. We left Connecticut,
Well,
And
how
when
did you get to Connecticut?
It
Yale.
was Yale.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right.
So, okay, so we met in Atlanta. He went to Yale. I went to Columbia in New York. We got married. We lived in Connecticut.
Hamden,
We lived
Connecticut.
in, right outside of New
Right
Haven.
outside New Haven.
Then we moved to Denver. Then we moved to Georgia. Then we moved to Chicago. So we've been here the longest, longest we've been in any place. And so you said, how do we handle all of that?
Yeah, because there's a lot of transition. So like let's go from, just to make it big, right? A big gap. After you get married to when you start at Trinity United, or when you guys start serving.
That's another podcast.
That's a podcast.
Seriously,
That's a different episode.
That's like
when the book comes out,
we'll let you know.
we want to come back on and.
Oh wait, hold on, because you guys were taking pictures, so I am curious to know: is there something that you guys are both working on?
What we did? We were taking pictures. Okay, so yeah, we have some things we're thinking about doing together.
Yes.
But we'll let you know about that in a little while.
I'm so excited.
Okay.
Super excited about this. Super excited. We got you.
I'm appreciating the enthusiasm. But so yeah, it was hard. And you mentioned Tabernacle in Augusta, Georgia. That was the first church where he was a pastor. And
that was a blessing to us.
We loved that. It was the best. It was the best experience ever.
Because a lot of people have horrific first
and it wasn't
perfect
and it wasn't easy. It was just those people. And if any of them hear this, I mean, we loved Augusta. We loved it. We still are in touch with people on a weekly basis from Augusta. And that was just, I'm
getting cards from Augusta right now for my birthday.
Yeah, it just was, they became our family. They embraced us completely. And
they loved our children.
And
actually, that's a thing that I'm interested in knowing about too, because there is a part of my heart is the concern for pastoral families, because there is a thing where it feels sometimes where, we get it. The shepherd is the shepherd, but the rest of the family kind of falls by the wayside, or, they're not attended to as much. You have kids. You have, a son and a daughter, which means to me, you have an idea of how to deal with kind of all of humanity, in male and female kind of thing.
Michaela has taught us a lot about dealing with that whole totality of humanity.
Listen, so how did y'all navigate that kind of stuff with, your kids and pastoral life and your marital stuff?
Yeah, so let me tell you, I'll be brief. I love the Lord. I love the Lord. And I love my husband, love my children. But I was not going to make them into churchy kids. And I was not going to make them have to be there for every single thing. And I was not going to force them to have to participate in every single thing. And I wanted them to be as normal as possible. They did not have to sit with me. I have had to have some stern conversations with people when they would have expectations of them that were unreasonable. And I did it in love, but they were very clear when I finished what I meant. And the best thing that happened, it was more so with our son. Our daughter's a very quiet-natured person. She kind of is, she's a stealthy person. She's like a kind of in the background with things. Our son is always very outgoing. And so, but what he did was there was a family that just like absorbed him. And we had a woman at church, Miss Brenda. Miss Brenda was like, every kid loved Miss Brenda. And she just,
everybody needs to have a Miss Brenda in their life.
Miss Brenda, but
somebody who will jack you up, but they love you, but they're going to tell you the truth every time. And so we kind of created this bubble, honestly, so that after church on Sundays, they would get out of church. And I would stay, we'd have meetings and things, but Miss Brenda would take the kids and go home. They could go home and eat. They could go home and play. They could get away from church. And not that I want them to love the Lord. And I think that they do. But, they have to grow in that relationship themselves. But I was just super protective of that. And I never wanted them
I've heard people who are PKs say things like, I'm never going to church again. I did enough of that growing up. I never wanted them to be that person.
Yeah.
I wanted them to be able to say, I choose this relationship because of the value it has in my life. And I think that they've seen that, and I don't think it was forced on them. So that's my perspective.
Yeah, I think they had a good relationship. The family, the Terrys, they did something to Elijah that was so endearing, and Elijah to this day, he thought it was the greatest thing ever. So he's really good friends with
the grandson
Justin, and they always sit in the balcony,
Mm.
and they were acting up, like kids do. And Mr. Terry, Grandpa Terry, slapped them both on the back of their head and said, "What's wrong with y'all?"
and most people try to treat the preacher's kid differently, like
Right.
slap, equalize the whole situation. Elijah was like, "Wow, thank you. I'm only one of you."
He is now. He's like, Mr. Terry is like the greatest person ever.
Yeah.
So we thank you. I think we got a lot, to be honest.
You got enough?
Yeah.
I think we got more than enough, quite honestly. We really appreciate you guys taking the time to talk to us. You got something you got to say?
No, I'm just very humble. So much thank
Humbled.
you. I'm humbled for just allowing us to do this. Just little old Barnett.
This is a
And we appreciate it.
Well, I want to say I thank you for inviting me to be a part of this, because he gets lots of invitations, but it just means a lot that you wanted both of us. So thank you. And we are kindred spirits. I can feel it, Yami. And Tim, I'm telling you touched my husband's heart in a major way, because he came home and he's like, man, let me tell you. He always comes home with great stories after he goes down to Mercer. So thank you all so much. And this was great. Thank you for having us. We can't wait to see what you put together.
We appreciate the background. You got
Yes.
Howard Thurman. I appreciate the book shout out there. And
So we thank y'all so much. Y'all have a good night.
You too.
all
Thank
right,
you.
take care.
Bye.
Man, that was such a dope interview, man.
I can't believe
excited.
I really I've been tuning on everything that was said for a couple of days now. Right?
For real. How they so family oriented.
Yeah.
But then, oftentimes we'll look at people that doing great things and think like everything is smooth. But when you begin to hear the struggles and how they allow the struggles to shape and mold them into who they are today, that's the beauty in it, man.
Yeah.
Our beauty is not in our glory, it's in our struggle.
That's it.
You know what I mean? So
I guess the question now is, and because we ran over time, we didn't get a chance to ask them this, but we'll give you guys our perspective. So what is your theology based off of, our conversation with the Mosses?
It was two things. They answered an age-old question for me. I would tell you, when I asked the question of how do you compromise? Because sometimes compromise can be a loss, right? It was one thing to say. My theology in that is compromising with your spouse is not a loss. It's actually a gain. You don't lose. You know what I mean? You begin to maneuver to make things work, and maneuver in a way to make things work for the whole family, even if it's going in a way that you feel like it's a compromise, right?
Yeah.
So you have to get out your own way. Don't feel like you're losing something. Like, this is for the overall goal.
Yeah.
And also, my theology too, it's two. It was just so deep. Is that allow your struggles, man, to shape and mold you. Don't run from them. Run to them.
Yeah.
So through everything that they went through the whole meeting and the calling and sticking with the calling and changing up the direction through turmoil and loss and death and dealing with stuff, they kept on moving and allowed God to shape them instead of running away from God. So my theology is, when you know who you are and you know what God called you to be, don't run away from the danger. Make the danger run away from you.
Yeah.
So what's your theology?
I guess my theology, and it's the framework that I think I'm living my whole life by now, is that it'll all work out eventually. It'll all what is the scripture that says it all works for the glory of those
Who love the Lord. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, whatever the correct. I'll put it right here. This is the right verse. But I was just thinking about how, even when they initially met, they had ideas of who they would be, or what their trajectory was going to be, and they both pivoted.
Right.
And so with with Dr. Moss, it led him down a road of ministry which he didn't expect, right?
He didn't want to do it.
But in turn, it opened up so many other doors for him. With Mrs. Moss, right? It was one thing, and a season of, I would call it like a Davidic testing, because it feels like, in essence, and I didn't say this to her, but it feels like she was called at one point, and there was a strategy behind building her up, essentially, that led to, you know, the community strategist position that or titles or manifestation, and the food justice. Like there was a that allowed her also to be very present in her family life, but also gave her a different trajectory than different than what she maybe initially thought that she was going to do.
Right.
And all in all, even amongst the pits and the falls, they were able to work together to do that. And I think the biggest thing is them finding home in each other, which I thought was like probably the most profound thing, because the concept that we're not struggling, but I'm struggling with, like, how do we do it all?
Right.
And I think it's to be sensitive to the Holy Spirit, you know, trust your inclination, or your instincts, and then let God be God, to your point, and then it'll all work out.
Right.
I don't know if any of that made sense.
It made so much sense, actually. You know.
But
basically,
I'm out of words, honestly, because it was just so good, and I don't even think that we needed to sum it up. But you know, we probably need to say something.
Right. I mean, because I'm still like in awe when I come think of over the whole interview, man.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it.
One thing I liked about Otis Moss is that he's a thinking man, right? He never just answers a question, just boom, boom. He brings it in slow. You know what I mean?
That's the homiletical
yeah,
bridge.
like he brings it in slow.
He's trying to find a parallel between how can I bridge this? I'm sure he doesn't think like that.
No, he just brings it in. It's just that wisdom. You know what I mean? So
yeah, but I just think that in general they were really, really
good. So
it was really cool.
So Dr. Otis Moss III is the author of many books, but this is one of them that is really one of my favorites. Blue Note Preaching in a Post-Soul World. It's really good. So, you know, if you have time, just go kind of, you know, pick up the book, and you want to read it back up or no?
No. And you, and then he has another book coming out.
He has another book that's coming out. That's coming at the first of the year, should be dropping. Dancing in the Darkness. I'm so excited to read that book. Just the titles alone just blows me away. But he's the author of several books, you know. And every last one of them that I've read has really helped me see the world in a different way. So he's they have a podcast called The Four.
The Four podcast hosts are Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis, Reverend Dr. Otis Moss, Leisha Sharon Harper, and Reverend Michael Ray Matthews. And it's a really amazing podcast that I don't know. It opens up the doors to so many concepts and constructs, but perspectives of some really wise, and it's funny too.
Yeah, it
really is funny. And you know I like to laugh. And let me tell you something. Mrs. Moss don't be about this social media life, but let's just, if y'all could, like, just I put her IG handle right here. Let's see if by putting her handle here, y'all will follow her and she'll become engaged. I can't help it.
No, because she got so much good stuff to offer, man. Like, dope. She is brilliant.
Oh my God, she was super dope.
She's a gift to the world. You know?
I'm gonna have to force calm myself down when I see her, so that I'm not like in her face, like, oh my God.
I'm gonna tell you like this, and we can end it on this. I done seen Yami fan out probably once ever, right? It was with.
Don't say it. But it was somebody. Okay.
And then this person right here, she was all just like that. That's how brilliant this person is. And Yami doesn't do that quite often.
I try to keep myself together, but it's really, really difficult these days. Anyway, thank you for watching another episode of the Love and Theology podcast.
That's it. I hope you enjoy.
Bye-bye.
I know I've questioned many things in this world, but I never had to question your love. So I know one thing's for sure. I can put trust in a real love, your love.
For every mom who ever missed a meal so they would have enough to let their babies eat. Fathers who grind every day to provide more than good advice. Charlie Sheen, take it, everything you gotta take to bring the bacon home and put it on the table. You are not forgotten, legacies are made in our darkest hours. God is watching, keep your faith. Don't bend, don't fold. There's a lyric I quote, tell me trouble don't last always. There's a Christ I know who revives the soul of the one who lose their way. Pursue the one who promised us a peace of mind. I tried to fly high on my choice of vice, but then I found Christ was the road to life.